It's the Schiff Show today on Capitol Hill. The open impeachment hearing is upon us. Also, could there be a secret Senate trial ballot? What's going on with Durham meeting with Downer? The cartels are making opioid synthetics, webcams at the border, statement from the Northwestern Dean, Warren's wealth tax, and oh, so much more coming up. Welcome to the Buck Sexton Show, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. Man, we have a lot to get to today because it is the Schiff Show, as people are calling it. Aptly named, aptly titled. Adam Schiff running the circus, as the New York Post depicted it on their cover this morning. The circus up on Capitol Hill. The whole thing is really quite absurd, quite obvious, quite transparent, and yet here we are, supposed to be transfixed by what is the most clear and, in my opinion, the irrefutable partisan ploy the Democrats have launched since the Russia collusion nonsense of a few years ago. You have a very basic argument that the Republicans have, which is that this is all just garbage. And then you have these ornate theories that keep shifting and changing. Shifty shift. The language is always being addressed, adopted, changed, altered, replaced. I tell you, my friends, if you were to steal a car, somebody would say, if they were going to bring charges against you, that this person is guilty of auto theft. It wouldn't be this person is guilty of auto theft. No, actually, this person's guilty of interfering in interstate automotive commerce. No, actually, this person created a danger to passersby with the illegal transport of a vehicle not owned by him. No, it's pretty straightforward when someone commits a crime, what the crime is, right? You say it. This person did this thing. If Trump had really broken the law, isn't it obvious that they wouldn't have to concoct a new legal theory justifying his impeachment every week? What is it this week? What was it last week? What was the week before? Just go through a timeline of this, and what you see is that they keep changing the rules, changing the game, and also changing the very allegations that they are making. Initially, we heard, and don't let this just slip down the memory hole. Initially, we heard that this was an election interference issue, and they even went as far as to say that this was a campaign finance issue, essentially trying to tie what happened here, they say, with Trump and Ukraine and Zelensky and the phone call back to the earlier charges that they had already made about a thing of value at Trump Tower. Oh, that was election campaign violation. Oh, and then there was also the effort to use the Stormy Daniels situation. That was election campaign violation. They've tried this before, and they're going back to these areas on purpose. The problem with the initial allegation was that any normal, rational person would say, hold on a second. If a president doing a thing, asking a foreign leader to do a thing that would benefit him politically is a thing of value from a foreign actor, then isn't every intelligent presidential act of foreign policy involving an interlocutor, wouldn't it all be a campaign finance violation? Benefits the campaign, makes him look good, doing this for his own purposes. They couldn't stay with that. But that was initially what they were going with this whistleblower. They were trying to create the basis of a criminal complaint. And then they started to use this language of the quid pro quo, which is, in this case, Latin for Democrats want you to be really scared. Ooh, quid pro quo. It is true, unfortunately, the way Mulvaney set it up when he had that somewhat disastrous interview a few weeks ago. I think what he said was accurate. He just didn't understand the politics around it. That foreign policy is built on quid pro quos. Do this thing or we won't give you aid. In fact, I believe earlier this week, the Trump administration began to investigate or began to put forward a policy of cutting off foreign aid to countries that don't have religious freedom. Great. Give religious freedom to your people, or we're not giving you foreign aid. You know what that is? That's a quid pro quo. We heard this all the time from people, and that was then the talking point. Because once they had established that there was some kind of a quid pro quo, then it was very likely thereafter that they would try to also change the legal language, also change whatever the charge may be, on the basis of, well, we've established the quid pro quo, which goes into discussions of fraud, extortion, bribery, and that's where we are now. Now we're hearing about this as a bribe or extorting a foreign ally. This is very important. Most Americans, and just go around and ask any of them, don't really get all that excited or care that much about whether, this Ukrainian guy talking to that Ukrainian guy, talking to this administration official who talked to that administration official, thought that there should be an investigation. There wasn't an investigation. The javelins were, it all starts to get, okay, this is just foreign policy. Like, why are we really supposed to care that much? Just from the perspective of a casual observer. And what ends up happening is that people have to latch on. The Democrats have to put forward certain things that sound ominous. And this is not new. This is not a new tactic. That's why bribery, extortion, crimes against the Constitution. They're saying these things, but then they're not actually able to prove any of them. But they're just hoping that the repetition of the words in the context of an impeachment proceeding will be enough that there'll be some support from their side, some support from people outside of their base for this, which I don't really think is going to happen. But they're just justifying this along the way with the choice of scary-sounding words that they use. And this should be a reminder also of what they did during Russia collusion. Why didn't they initially say it was conspiracy, which is a federal criminal charge? Well, because conspiracy, as it is written in the statutes, there are certain elements that you have to be able to prove to it. They didn't want it to be about having to prove the elements of an actual crime with Russia collusion. They wanted it to be, it looks bad. Maybe it's a crime, or maybe it's a political transgression. So that was why collusion gave them more room, more leeway. Okay, you didn't actually take an affirmative step in a conspiracy, so we can't actually say it's a conspiracy. You didn't actually do the thing that we're saying you did, but you kind of wanted to, and you benefited from it, even though you didn't do anything. So that seemed collusion. We'll call it collusion, even though there is a real crime of collusion. Usually has to do with companies that are price fixing. But then that wasn't enough. And then they moved to treason. They just started saying, well, the president, and we're hearing that again. Betraying the Constitution is what they're saying. Betraying the Constitution is the verbiage of today, but back during the Russia collusion, this is now just Ukraine collusion. This is 2.0. Back during Russia collusion, we would hear about treason that the president committed. And then some people said, well, hold on a second. There's actually a definition of treason. I know that gets a lot of attention. That's a buzzword. But you can't just throw that around because people know what treason is. So can we come up with something else? Oh, and then it was obstruction. They keep switching the crime. They never can prove the crime. And so instead of saying maybe we should stop just accusing this president of criminal acts that he has not committed and beat him at the ballot box, which the Democrats are very worried about doing because they have weak candidates and the Democratic Party has lost its mind, they just say, let's go on to the next one. Let's just move on to the next allegation. They don't have to prove anything. They don't have to actually answer to their own side because no matter how crazy what they say may be, no matter how outlandish the allegation against Trump, as long as it is anti-Trump, the people who hate Trump, who vote for Democrats, who watch MSNBC and CNN and read the New York Times, the Washington Post, and others, they give them an A for effort. You didn't get Trump this time. Maybe you'll get him next time. Let's come up with something else. They're going after his taxes, saying he's a tax cheat. They're going after him on the emoluments clause. They wanted to use the 25th Amendment. It's as though the Democrats, instead of trying to make their case for why the American people should entrust them with power, have all just sat around in a room with law books and had a bunch of very unethical lawyers saying, well, maybe we could take this law and stretch it and find a way to pretend that the president violated this one. This is the way that they are approaching the 2020 election. Not making a case to the American people, but trying to pretend that they have a criminal case to make against him, to make against the president. And then every time it falls apart, they fall back on, well, it's really a political issue. It's a political crime. And then they find another one. They act like he's broken the law. Oh, no, we can't prove that. Turns out he didn't break the law. Well, what he did is bad faith when it comes to the Constitution and our democracy. He's undermining our institutions. One thing that people are saying today, who are reading between the lines a little bit, looking closely, that the deep state, in a sense, is also on display, on trial here for everyone else to see. Notice how the Democrats will put forward from the testimony this morning, they will put forward their witnesses, and their witnesses can talk about, well, my father did this amazing thing for the country, and that, and my grandfather, and my great-great-great-grandfather, and my family has been serving this country selflessly since the revolution, and I have no, that's great, sure, whatever, that's all fine, except why is it that the backstory intended to give the appearance of gravitas, of apolitical, selfless service to country, in order to give additional weight to the allegations that these Democrat-only called witnesses are going to give against the president? Why is it that is necessary or worthwhile for the American people to hear about these people, their backgrounds, so that they are more credible as witnesses? But we cannot hear from the whistleblower, and in fact, the whistleblower's identity is to be kept a secret because his motivations to light the match that has led to this absurd conflagration, his motivation is irrelevant. That's what they keep telling us. The underlying facts are true regardless of what, well, no, the underlying fact, we know what the underlying facts are. The motivation for bringing the allegation is really everything. In fact, there never should have been a whistleblower complaint because he's not a whistleblower and this isn't within his purview as somebody working for the federal government. But as I've told you, they have to protect that scam as long as they can. And as they get deeper into this impeachment process, then it won't really matter all that much. They'll have all these people on the record saying effectively what the whistleblower's initial allegation. And I still sit here and perhaps I feel like I'm a lone man on the island saying this, but certainly a lone man on Manhattan Island saying it these days. Although Hannity's uptown, so I guess there are other people here on the island. But there's nothing wrong, meaning there's no violation of what the president did. You cannot like it. It's bare knuckle. I'm not going to pretend that there isn't a dual justification for what he did, but no violation. There's no crime, certainly. And as the Democrats walk around pretending to care so much about the Constitution and the rule of law, just remember something. All these Democrats today on Capitol Hill are ranting about the rule of law and duty to the Constitution. But never forget that they were just fine with Hillary Clinton violating the Espionage Act over 100 times with recklessness, which is specified in the statute, and they couldn't care less because she was their candidate and she was going to be in power, and that is all that mattered. Remember, the Democrats, power is what matters.
1 week after that, Donald Trump would have the now infamous July 25th phone call with Ukrainian President Zelensky. During that call, Trump complained that the U.S. relationship with Ukraine had not been reciprocal. Later, Zelensky thanks Trump for his support in the area of defense and says that Ukraine is ready to purchase more Javelins, an anti-tank weapon that was among the most important deterrents of further Russian military action. Trump's immediate response: I would like you to do us a favor, though. Trump then requested that Zelensky investigate the discredited 2016 CrowdStrike conspiracy theory and even more ominously look into the Bidens. Neither of these investigations was in the U.S. national interest, and neither was part of the official preparatory material for the call. Both, however, were in Donald Trump's personal interest.
Guess what? Adam Schiff doesn't get to determine what the national interest is when it comes to foreign policy. Donald Trump does. It does not matter that Adam Schiff doesn't like what Donald Trump says. It does not matter that all these Democrats in Congress do not like what he said. It is not a violation worthy of impeachment or worthy of any of this to do something that Democrats don't like. But they are the same way that they have been criminalizing political differences with Republicans for years, and we sit there and take it. You know, you want the Romneyite, McCain-style Republican Party? Just let Republicans get prosecuted for stuff while Democrats get away with everything. That was what we were told we had to do for a long time. That's just sit back and take it. Scott Walker, Bob McDonnell, Rick Perry, Chris Christie, go down the list. All these Republicans getting prosecuted for things that they didn't even do, things that weren't even crimes. But everybody, Scott Walker was investigated, not actually indicted. But they were trying to get him, desperately trying to get him. And the biggest one of all, President Trump, investigated for over 2 years by a special counsel for something that the special counsel had to know within the first 30 days of the investigation was completely bogus. But grind that process on. Use that machinery of the deep state, the federal bureaucracy that just, they all believe so strongly they're doing all this great stuff for the American people. Here are a few things. The federal government is way too big. The federal government is way too powerful. There are too many federal employees. They cost too much money. They don't do enough work, and they think they're much more important than they are. That is generally true across the federal government. It is especially true of the State Department, let me tell you. You'll see some of that on display today, that's for sure. They think that they know better than the president, and therefore they have some extra constitutional right to interfere with the president. We've seen this happen. We've seen this continue to happen. And the response that we're told the president should have is just take all this incoming and never do anything back. National interest, you know what I think is the national interest? Finding out if there was anything strange going on with CrowdStrike. Why are Ukrainian-backed companies the only company that looks at the DNC servers? The FBI doesn't look at the servers of the Democratic National Committee during an election year when they're hacked, and we're supposed to think that that's not strange. We're supposed to believe that that's just fine. It's kind of like how we're supposed to believe that a rumor allegedly passed on in a bar to George Papadopoulos is enough to justify an FBI investigation of a presidential candidate when it's Trump, but a vice president's son getting $50,000 a month from an ultra-corrupt Ukrainian natural gas company, that's assumed to be just fine. Debunked conspiracy, they say, because it's Joe Biden, and he's a Democrat. Oh, isn't it weird how that happens?
These are the questions we must ask and answer, without rancor if we can, without delay regardless, and without party favor, and without prejudice if we are true to our responsibilities. Benjamin Franklin was asked what kind of a country America was to become. A republic, he answered, if you can keep it. The fundamental issue raised by the impeachment inquiry into Donald J. Trump is, can we keep it?
Isn't it great to have Adam Schiff telling us about the vision of the founders? Doesn't it just make you feel warm and fuzzy to have this sleazy, dishonest, lib prosecutor, now, of course, in Congress, telling us about how it's a republic if we can keep it. Meanwhile, he is spearheading the effort once again after Russia collusion. Wow, what a coincidence. There's another vague but ominous but vague conspiracy that means Donald Trump can't be president anymore. The first one didn't work, but now there's another one, a different one. I ask you to just approach this as a rational person. What's more likely? That they keep concocting, they keep constructing, fabricating these narratives to end the Trump presidency, or that Trump really does manage to engage in these nefarious, multifaceted international plots that are that are egregious violations of the Constitution, treason perhaps even, but they never get proven. They never actually go anywhere. Nothing even happens as a result of them, as we see here in Ukraine. But we're told that this is the worst thing that a president has perhaps ever done in the country. This is absurd. If you just look at this like a normal person, you understand right away this is absurd. But they're not going to back down. They're not going to back away. They'd prefer the continuation of what has been their most effective resistance tactic so far, which is just to continue to flood the airwaves with nonsense conspiracy theories about the president, to use the federal bureaucracy against the president, to call for deep state elements from within the government to speak out against the president and use their privileged access and positions to do it. And with each failure, we are told, forget about what we said before, now we've really got him. Forget about the fact that we lied to you about that other thing, about Russia collusion or about obstruction or about whatever, about the emoluments clause, about the 25th Amendment, about, that we've created all of this frenzy. This time it's real. This time he has violated his oath to the Constitution and must be removed from office. Only deranged people or really stupid people at this point can accept this. I mean, there is no explanation for this other than they are full of it and they're crazy. There's nothing more that really can be said about it. How is it that Trump is at the same time the most incompetent, unfit president in history? Just a bumbling buffoon, if you will. And yet, on the other side of this, he never manages to get caught doing the really bad thing that they say that he was doing. They have to have people who say, well, it isn't really the violation, isn't really the crime that we've said it is, but if you look at it from this angle, is it this color or that color? Is the dress blue or is the dress gold? I mean, this is what we keep doing with Trump, according to the libs. And there's no accountability for it on their side because, as I said, they don't care. They don't care about the things that they profess matter so much. They don't care about the sanctity of our democracy, about the institutions. They only care about institutions when they serve their interests, the interests of left-wing power. That's it. They don't care. That's why when the Supreme Court doesn't go their way, they're like, yeah, let's just add a few more seats onto it. That's why when the Electoral College doesn't give them the end result they want, yeah, let's abolish the Electoral College. When the Constitution says things that even they can't get around, it's, well, the Constitution's really old. Maybe we should just forget about it. Or we can't know what it really means. Or it was corrupt from its origins. Whatever it may be. There is no institution that the left will not throw under the bus at the first sign of any obstruction of their agenda, the first sign of any trouble. If it's a speed bump for them, it goes under the bus. By the way, Schiff, in one of his best moments, this was great today. Play 22. This is Adam Schiff talking.
Do you anticipate when we might vote on the ability to have the whistleblower in front of us, something you, of the 435 members of Congress, you are the only member who knows who that individual is, and your staff is the only staff of any member of Congress who's had a chance to talk with that individual. We would like that opportunity. When might that happen in this proceeding today?
First, as the gentleman knows, that's a false statement. I do not know the identity of the whistleblower, and I'm determined to make sure that identity is protected.
Adam Schiff is telling you that he doesn't know the identity of the whistleblower. Really? We know the whistleblower met with Adam Schiff's staff. How is that supposed to work? So staffers that work for Adam Schiff met with this person, and Adam Schiff, who does have access to classified information, and he's like, no, I don't want to know who this person is. How could he know if the whistleblower is credible at all? He's going to take the word of his staffers entirely on this? He's going to leave that decision-making, leave himself vulnerable to what would happen if he ran with this thing and it turned out to be a farce, which I think we're going to find out it is, in terms of who the whistleblower is and what just a clear Democrat partisan. And the media, by the way, the lie of omission here that the media is engaged in by not not just sharing the name of the alleged whistleblower and background, but their unwillingness to try to dig, to find, to confirm. It's the single most important bit of information in the country right now when it comes to the news cycle. They don't care. No obligation to get to the truth. And that's why the media is broken. It has been overtaken. There are, I think, in a recent survey of colleges across the country, there were more in the social sciences, there were more self-described socialists and Marxists by a factor of 3, I think, than there were Republicans on college campuses in America. That same phenomenon of just how did this place become such a political monoculture where everyone thinks the same, it's just this echo chamber of left-wing nonsense. That same phenomenon exists in journalism. See, the only reason we don't know all this is because journalists say, I'm not going to share my political affiliation. I know what their political affiliation is. It's 90 to 95% Democrats. And including far left, radical, viva la revolucion Democrats. And yet here we are. Oh, no, they're just presenting us with the facts. They don't want to present us with the facts of the whistleblower. Does any person in America believe that Adam Schiff doesn't know the identity of the whistleblower? Really? Does anyone really think that's plausible? He doesn't know? Now, why would he say that? Because they're going to fight to make sure that Republican members of the House who do have access to classified information. Remember, they're acting like the whistleblower is the nuclear codes to the nuclear football that travels with the president. Who cares? So there's a whistleblower statute. He doesn't even qualify under the statute. And the statute says explicitly that they can decide if they think it's going to come out anyway, that they're going to tell people who the whistleblower is. This isn't, we're not talking about somebody who's, anyone in public life these days can claim their life is in jeopardy. I mean, that's all bull crap. I saw CNN doing that. This person's going to be so much under threat. This person's going to have a fat CNN contract and a book deal by the end of the year. You watch. His life is in jeopardy, though. Anybody who speaks out on any of these issues gets death threats. And every person I know in conservative media, their families get threatened. We don't get to walk around like, excuse me, you can't criticize me. I've had psychotic leftists get up in my face before I went to a party and scream epithets at me. That doesn't work, right? But, the whistleblower. It's so scary. This guy thinks he's saving the republic, I'm sure. I would also say that the Washington Examiner, which I believe was the first one that I know of that reported on Eric Ciaramella, who they reported on as the whistleblower, and there are photos circulating everywhere. The entire world knows who this guy allegedly is. If it were you, and if there really was such a high price to possibly be paid for being the whistleblower, don't you think you'd be like, hey, I'm not the whistleblower? Right? I mean, are we allowed to apply common sense and reason to this, or are we just supposed to swallow whatever nonsense is being thrown our way by Adam Schiff and these hyper-partisan Democrats? They're making a mockery of this process. They're making a mockery of the Congress, a mockery of the rule of law, of fairness, of justice. And as they do it, they say they're doing it because they love this country so much. It's appalling. It's appalling. Trump is such a horrible president, they say, and yet they can't let a free and fair vote occur. Why? Why can't we have a vote? Why can't we have an election to determine whether or not this president's done a good job? Here's the problem that looms the back of minds of Democrats. They've convinced themselves that 2016 was not just an anomaly, but that 2016 was unfair, was stolen, wasn't right. Now, as crazy as libs are these days, and they have gotten crazier. I mean, there's empirical evidence. There's data now to support. They've gotten crazier. As crazier as they are, isn't it going to be harder even for the most diehard Nancy Pelosi fan, MSNBC watching, climate change alarmist, 37 genders adhering leftist? Isn't it going to be hard for them to explain to themselves how Trump is the worst president ever, a threat to the nation, a criminal and could be the end of this republic, but he got reelected? 2 terms. I know that they'll come up with some, oh, he cheated again. I mean, there'll be libs who there's no reason with them at all. But there will be some who will have to think, what does this mean about their vision for America, their view of what this country really is? If they really believe that Trump is all the things they say, and he manages to beat whatever boring, pandering Democrat they put forward, what does that mean about their ability to really understand what's going on in this country and what America's all about? They don't want to have to deal with that reckoning. They don't want to have that day of clarity. And that's why they're trying to do everything they can to avoid it. You see, impeachment isn't going to result in removal, although there is a theory out there I want to get to in a second about how it could. I don't think it'll happen, but it's interesting. And it shows you just more of this: open the rule books, open the law books, and find some loophole and just exploit it against this president. But even if impeachment doesn't work, and if you don't get removal afterwards, which I don't think, I mean, you will get impeachment, but you won't get removal by the Senate. Remember that if this is helpful in preventing Trump from getting reelected, it would be just like what Harry Reid said about his slander, his false allegation that Mitt Romney hadn't paid taxes in 10 years. Well, he didn't win, did he? That's in the background of all of this, too. They pretend that this process will be a disappointment to the left if it doesn't get a removal of the president. But we all really know this is just another desperate attempt to drag this president down into the mud and all of his supporters and see what happens afterwards. And that's where this really is.
The USMCA will create up to 500,000 American jobs and add at least 1.2% more to our total GDP, and it should be much higher than that. Yet Democrats in Washington would rather pursue outrageous hoaxes and delusional witch hunts, which are going absolutely nowhere, don't worry about it, than pass the USMCA and deliver real stuff for the American workers.
Another way that Democrats, unfortunately, are winning with all of these underhanded tactics, or at least are getting benefit from all these underhanded tactics, is that we're not talking about what has this president done and what has it meant for the American people. What's really going on right now? Interestingly enough, one part of this that never really seems to get talked about is that the president has been willing to stand up to China, and now we have protests in Hong Kong where Hong Kongers are fighting back against mainland Chinese totalitarianism. I'm not saying that one led directly to the other, but you have the first leader of the free world in decades who's willing to say, enough nonsense, China. I do think that even if it's a bit subconscious, the willingness of America, the beacon of freedom for the rest of the world, to say, China, knock it off. You are not all-powerful, Chinese Communist Party. Is it possible that influenced some of the thinking of Hong Kongers who wanted to stand up for their own rights and freedoms in response to, of course, this extradition law that was a violation of the pact that Hong Kong had made with the Chinese government? I think it is certainly worth consideration. But let's take it home for a second. Forget about that. Let's look at, I don't know, things that people usually in a re-election campaign are told should matter. They were told it shouldn't matter in 2012 with Barack Obama, by the way, because the economy was in crappy shape. But you were supposed to vote for Obama because, he gave a good speech and, was a charismatic guy. So vote for Obama because of that, even though the economy was the slowest recovery out of a recession since the Great Depression, maybe because of things that the Obama administration did. Meanwhile, the Trump administration, the numbers are just booming all over the place. Play clip 8, if you would, please, producer Mark.
Unemployment has recently achieved the lowest rate in 51 years. African American unemployment, Hispanic American unemployment, and Asian American unemployment have all reached the lowest rates in history. Women's unemployment, the best numbers in 71 years. We expect that number of 71 years, which isn't good compared to the other numbers, is it? But women also will soon be historic, we think. Blue-collar jobs are leading the way in our middle-class boom. We've added 25,000 mining jobs, 128,000 energy jobs, 1.2 million manufacturing and construction jobs, and manufacturing was supposed to be dead in our country. You would need, according to a past administration representative, at the highest level of that past administration, you would need a magic wand to bring back manufacturing jobs. Well, we brought them back, and we brought them back to over 600,000 manufacturing jobs as of today.
That should matter, not this impeachment garbage.